Thanks everyone for coming this morning, Saturday morning. I hope you got donuts and coffee. This is so cool. It's National Volunteer Week actually, and it's really cool for an organization to let a volunteer like me host their own event. So big thank you to HAIBAYO. If this is your first time here, if you don't know HAIBAYO, it's a nonprofit up front here, and will be a cafe starting in about June. Date to be determined based on how far we get with the renovations. But this space is all about community gathering, cultural preservation, being a kind of living museum for Southeast Asian culture here on Argyle. If you're not familiar, this community has been here for over 40 years. That works. The Asia on Argyle designation was around 2008, and so a big part of what's happening here is the new generation, the second generation, is really trying to take over ownership and try to preserve what has been started by this community. Also, a big thank you to the funders of this event. I want to mention, and I'll come back to why this is important, but Illinois Humanities funded the grant for this project, as well as the Field Foundation and Healing Illinois. These grants really aim at building connections across generations, across cultures, and so this will be a very important theme for us today. Now, I am going to be talking about settling into a community, migration, different people interacting, and so I do want to do a very short land acknowledgement related to that. I used to chair public meetings when I was living in Washington State. We started every meeting with a land acknowledgement, but I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm going to do it a little differently, because sometimes it feels like we do these land acknowledgement statements as something to get through before the business at hand or the agenda that you want to get into. So very simply, I'll just say, as far as the acknowledgement, the land that we gather on today and occupy is the unceded ancestral homelands of the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi nations. So as far as the statement part, I'll leave it there because, the statements are often written in a kind of formal language that I think actually is the same kind of language used in contracts and laws that defrauded a lot of Native tribes. So I don't want to go into that direction, but I do want to say that an acknowledgement without some kind of action or correction after it feels like, symbolic tokenism. And so what I want to do, just very briefly, is to highlight maybe a couple places that, sorry for my presumption, you might be familiar with them, but these are just places I've connected with or come across in the last few years since I moved back to Chicago in 21. And they're great Native American-led groups and organizations that present living history, art, history that is being created today. And so I think it's really important for us to not just focus on, the absence of Native Americans on these lands, which I think is a bad way to define people, but really focus on presence and what is coming up and what is being written today. So if you have a chance, please check these out. I'll have this slide at the end too, so you can get this information. Sorry, I'm going to rely on my notes a little more than usual just because it's been a busy week. And we put these up yesterday. A big thank you to Tran with HAIBAYO for helping me out. Actually, a couple of the frames fell overnight, so nothing broke, but I did have to do a bit of repair this morning. So just a little bit of a logistical thing anyway.
You're doing good.
Thanks. Okay, so I bring all this up, and I want to connect the land acknowledgement conversation to this talk because this is about living history. So I think one of the things that is really interesting to me about interacting with Michael in this grant is that it's teaching me about animating history, activating history, which is quite literally the name of this grant. It's an activating history microgrant from Illinois Humanities. And so this is a way for us to, I think, receive history or interact with it in a way that is not just about static things, not just about being informed and not merely thinking about history as the past, but like I said, it's something that is still being written every day, and in many ways in a kind of grassroots daily interaction type of way. So a lot of the photos you'll see show just people, which is something also interesting to me as a photographer. You don't get a real sense of place, it's a focus on people, and it's really in these interactions that you start to get a sense of what this neighborhood was like. To me, more so than just buildings, which change every couple decades, or events even. It's really the people and their attitudes and who they are that drive what history feels like to me. So activating history, then the activation part is something I've been thinking a lot about with this grant, which I got, I think, when did we connect? About last July, something like that?
Sometime last summer, yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's already interesting that this gives me the opportunity to do this as an individual. So this is a pretty special feature of this grant, the Illinois Humanities Grant. Oftentimes grants are not available to individuals. They are available to organizations like nonprofits and museums and whatnot. This one, actually, anybody can apply for it, even if you have no 501c3, tax-exempt designation. So I think that's a huge bit of gratitude that I have to Illinois Humanities for making that accessible. And I think this is also why I wanted to have this event on Argyle Street. So as I mentioned, this is a Southeast Asian, predominantly Southeast Asian community. And as I think about activating history, making it more accessible, it's a two-way street. So I love to see people on the street being exposed to Southeast Asian influences. And at the same time, as somebody who grew up as an immigrant here, I know that sometimes it's hard to step outside of a community like this if you grow up in it. That sometimes histories like this aren't always accessible to you. You're focused on yourself, you're focused on just getting settled in, trying to navigate the whole traditional culture versus embracing the new, and you're not thinking about contextually where did you settle, or how did your history connect to other histories. And so for me, this talk is so much about not just building bridges across communities, but also building bridges across histories and seeing how different communities interacted in the past in ways that we might not have been aware of. So I'm really thinking about boundaries that not just exist between people, but across time and generations and communities. So, like I said, the focus today is on Uptown, just before the arrival of Southeast Asian, mostly refugees, but also migrants and immigrants because of the Vietnam War, but also just a lot of changes in the world right around the 60s. And so before that happened, Uptown was, I would say, a hotbed of organizing, a lot of different energies around issues like housing, food justice, healthcare. Does it sound familiar? Politics, police brutality. And so I think for me, a big part of this moment is asking, what can we do about these issues? I hear this from friends, from people working in institutions, like, how do we make things better? And oftentimes we don't even know where to start. So in interacting with Michael and hearing about, what the moment was like then, and also how do you even get started getting involved, connecting with people who are change makers. Here's a guy who's been there, quite literally was there in the 60s in Uptown and throughout the area. And so I want to introduce you to my friend Michael James, who, he's he's a little bit everywhere. The more I learn about him, the more amazed I am. But let me just go through a quick introduction. We met through a mutual friend, the wonderful Tamara Smith, Tammy, who works for Kerr Publishing. It's called, or some people refer to it as the oldest radical publisher in America. So they publish books on like the labor movement, art as resistance, Marxism, all kinds of things that relate to some of the issues that we talk about. And, you know, I was just moving to Uptown. I asked her who I should talk to. And she said, oh, actually, we're publishing the book of this guy that you should know. He was very active in Uptown in the 60s, Michael James. So I sent him a bunch of messages, and he doesn't reply to me at all. And finally, his son, Hal, who's back there, thank you, Hal, he replies, and he's like, why don't you just come up, and Michael will be here. So I do. I go up there, and all this would have failed if Michael's like, yeah, you've been messing around. I don't know who you are. Like, I don't know why you're here. But he doesn't, right? Big handshake, and we just talk for hours. Lots of great conversations. He's really into starting up projects. I'm into starting up projects. So we hit it off right away. And the more I talk to him, the more I realize he's hard to pin down. He's an activist. He's a journalist, photographer. That poster there is the cover page of a newspaper called Rising Up Angry that he helped start. If you know the Heartland Cafe from before in Rogers Park, he's a co-founder of that. And my favorite fact maybe that I learned a little bit later, the movie The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, he's in that. So now maybe we have to do a film screening and do a drinking game wherever, yeah. So yeah, the Steven Seagal classic, Under Siege. Okay, so let me talk about what we tried to do. So as I talked to Michael, he has such a powerful recall of details, of people, not just like in the moment, but what they've gone on to do, how they intersect. And that to me was sort of different. Like I've done a lot of media work, I've done a lot of storytelling, but just being in his presence, he really draws you into being in those moments with you, being in those conversations with you. And so through him, I'm starting to understand networks and relationships more than I am about place. And, you know, so like when he says, oh, I worked in Uptown, that actually isn't the most interesting fact about the work that he was doing. It was about all the different collaborators that he had who then went on to do pretty incredible stuff. And I think he'll touch on some of these people. So it made me think that there was a journey here that, you know, with all these different things and projects they worked on, maybe we could do like a, you know, like a then and then and then and now progression of the decades that he worked in and sort of chart that out. So one of the photos that really captivated me right at the beginning was this one. And this is where we'll get into actual photos and talking about some of these stories. This photo, I saw it on his porch. He does a gallery on his porch on Sundays in the summers.
1509 West Lunch.
Thank you. I walk by this spot every day walking my dog. This is on Kenmore Avenue, just south of Montrose. And so I was like, oh, this is brilliant. We can do like this kind of charting of the decades of Michael James's work. And that's what the grant was sort of built around. Like I could show this kind of, you know, capturing 60 years of history. And so I was like, Michael, let's go down there and let's start with a very simple juxtaposition of then and now. Let's find the spot. Because he said he lived in this building from which this photo was taken as he was working in Uptown. And so that's your car, right?
That with the rag top with the torn roof, yeah. I drove it from Chicago to Connecticut, and then I think I had the roof repaired, and then I drove it to Berkeley.
I mean, you could have said any car in that photo.
No,
You didn't have to.
right there.
Okay, so then we drove down there, and here's a different view of the same street. But then we drove down there, and I was like, hey, Michael, let's walk down. Let's try to, you know, find that then and now view. And so here's Michael walking down the street, and we're looking for this spot.
Oh, rickety looking.
Don't worry, it's not your fault. Okay? And then here's Michael walking away from me, and it's at this point that I realized two important things. One, he walks really fast, and I'm falling behind. And two, we don't find the spot. Like, that's a problem. This doesn't feel right to me as far as like capturing history. This actually felt kind of dumb. And then like as I'm running after him, like my camera bouncing on my hip, like I felt dumb. So then I thought, okay, this is maybe where we think it is. And I'll explain this to you later. I think I solved the mystery. But we actually don't find the exact spot, at least in our investigation at the time. And I realized something really important. That actually isn't necessary to the story. Finding that exact spot, that historical precision, isn't what Michael is about, isn't how he tells stories. And, you know, historical accuracy is absolutely objectively important. But so is emotional authenticity and how history grabs you and how it inspires you. And especially now in this moment of podcasts and, you know, vibes and how audiences receive information, misinformation, there's so much emotional drive behind how people react to any visual, any stimuli. And it occurred to me that this story isn't about finding all the exact places and detailing, you know, in some way, all the historical events. I actually went to a lecture about my neighborhood about a month ago that was brilliant. It had archival footage, public records, absolutely well done and brilliant in those ways. And this talk is not like that at all. This talk is about locating with precision the emotional heart of the stories that Michael tells, and in some ways being inspired and excited by being in that moment of connection with him and wanting to learn more. So I'm going to start to pass it off here to Michael. I just want to point out this photo here. You remember this moment? We almost got into a fight after. Not you and me, but anyway. He's taking a photo into this grocery shop, which used to be the organizing office for one of the groups that he was a big part of, which actually we'll talk about because their office prior to being here is just down the street. And it's captured in one of the photos over there. But this is Michael, also his way of engaging with the space and trying to get a view of it. And this is actually a photo he took just stepping back a little bit, capturing scenes from Uptown. And this is a photo from what year?
It had to be 66 to 68, somewhere in there. That's the weekly meeting.
This is looking out from that space. This is a photo of a meeting that happened.
And that woman in the front, the second from the left.
So I'll let you take it over and
I'm
tell
just
us.
going to say that that's Sarah, and she had a newspaper stand at right down the street here. And she was a member of the Industrial Workers of the World and had lived in Moscow in 1917. And that's her. We had a lot of old radicals coming out.
How many people would you say?
There's probably 50 people every week came. We did plays, a little theater, the evil landlord, Mayor Daley, and people rising up.
So I'll turn over to you. I know you wanted to go through some of the background, but also if you want to do slides.
Why don't we let me talk for about 10 minutes and you'll cut me off as needed, and then you can go through slides and I can tell more stories.
Great, let's do that.
And just do one more. So we go, that's Harry Belafonte in front of the joint office with members of the welfare union, including Peggy Terry on the way on the right, who we would run for vice president along with Eldridge Cleaver of the Black Panther Party in 1968. We didn't expect to win, but we did expect to help build the forces of people organizing around the country. So you want me to go?
Yeah, I'll use
Okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. I don't know if I could live up to it. But I want to thank HAIBAYO and I want to thank Jefferson for getting me involved in this, because I'm waking up, old guys wake up a lot anyhow at night, but I've been waking up a lot remembering things that happened back in the day. And it's fun, and sometimes I write them down or grab my phone, and it's really been a productive time since we met. So 61 years ago, in June, I graduated from Lake Forest College, and I had a job. I had planned to become a sociologist. I had got a Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. I was going off to Berkeley to graduate school, and somehow I ended up working for some Notre Dame anthropologists or sociologists who lived right across from that picture. And my job was to be a participant observer among Southern white migrants to the city. So what I remember not only the Jubilee Club at Kenmore and Montrose, where there was country music and a cage with a shake dancer. What I do remember is learning how to make biscuits and gravy, and there was a one-armed guy from Kentucky named Penny Menser who taught me how to roll cigarettes. He did it one-handed. And he also encouraged me, along with some other old guys, to take plugs from Jim Beam, little half-pint bottles. So I would do this kind of thing in the daytime, then I'd go write notes, and every once in a while have a talk with the project. I left in that car that you saw a picture of, drove back to my home in Connecticut, visited family, got in the car again, and I think we had fixed the roof by then, and I drove to Berkeley to start graduate school. On my way to Berkeley, I stopped in Delano and I met with Cesar Chavez, and I gave him my letter jacket, my football jacket from Lake Forest. I ended up in Berkeley, and the first day I walked on the campus, there was a big group of people surrounding a police car. Some of you may know about the free speech movement, and it was over the right to set up tables and promote off-campus events that the university tried to shut down. This was the summer that all these people from the north had gone south to do voter registration. This was following some big demonstrations against the House Un-American Activities Committee in San Francisco, and it was just the wrong time for the university to try to shut people down. So I stayed in graduate school for a year and a half. I did a study of, I was working on a paper about organizing the poor, and I learned about Alinsky, I learned about the war on poverty, and I had learned about SDS and what they call the Economic Research and Action Project. I found a piece of paper on the ground. It said, build the interracial movement of the poor. Whew, right up my alley. I'm in sociology. I'm trying to figure out conflict theory, how you bring different groups of people together in a harmonious way. So this was like a gift from the gods. I wrote to the SDS office and said, I'd like to get involved. And they say, well, you have to do it. So a number of us in the summer of '65 went into West Oakland by the Southern Pacific Yards, and we worked around fences being torn down. It was a lot of white kids, one African American in a pretty much black neighborhood. It was also when the Vietnam War was cranking up and the troop trains are coming through, and we're trying to stop the trains. I remember these guys with their heads shaved on the train, kind of looking freaked out as we're banging with banners against the train and people are trying to stop the train. I can't get into too much detail, but I met Stokely Carmichael. How do you say his African? Kwame Ture, who came up with the slogan Black Power in Lowndes County, Alabama. And I met him at the Fillmore Auditorium. For you rock and roll historians, know about a lot of great shows were there. This was a benefit for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who were the vanguard, we thought. They were really the best. And Stokely, we're in a little room and I'm talking to him. I say, I'm gonna leave college. I'm gonna leave Berkeley. I'm gonna either go work in Newark with Tom Hayden in a black neighborhood or with Rennie Davis in Uptown Chicago in a poor white neighborhood. He said, work with white people. We got a lot going on in the black community. We need more in the white community. So a guy named Bert Steck and I got in that same old car, and we drove back to Chicago. There's a lot of things happen on the way, but we did stop in Des Moines, Iowa, and met with Fred Stover, who had been the Minister of Agriculture, or whatever they call it, under Roosevelt. And he was the head of the United States Farmers Organization and kind of a left-wing guy. And at age 22, 23, 24 now, there's a lot happening, and you're taking it in, you're learning, you're picking it up. So we continue driving from Des Moines to Chicago. We show up in the afternoon. We're somewhere on Argyle, and there's a demonstration against Price Right. Price Right is two Southern guys running a repair shop for TVs. They had sold Mrs. Hinton, an East Indian woman, a bad TV, and she had come to join and was involved with Join Community Union. And I had just about got into a fight with one of these guys. This is my first day here in Uptown, or back in Uptown. Lo and behold, these guys became supporters of the organization. They made amends with Mrs. Hinton, and so that was that. Now, Join Community Union was a project of SDS, Students for Democratic Society. And the idea was to go into poor neighborhoods and organize the poor to build a better future. And it originally had been Jobs or Income Now, and they had tried to organize the unemployed. But there were not much was happening. They eventually took all their contact cards, and most of them were in Uptown. So they moved up to Uptown, and they had an office at 1100 West Argyle. And there's some picture of the old office, and then I think in the slides there's another picture of it, some people there that Danny Lyon took. Let me just say that these photos are not all mine. There's some that I took. Nancy Hollander, who was a lawyer for the people in Guantanamo, and she's played by Sissy Spacek in the movie about that. She took some of these pictures. Gail Marco took some, maybe Todd Gitlin, Fran Ainsley, various people, and you took some of them.
And you took some.
And I took a few.
And you're in some of them.
I am.
So you did take those.
So Join is around now in Uptown, and so from the spring of 1966 until the fall of '68, when the Democratic Convention was coming to town, there was a lot of activity, and there was a number of people. There were people who were already here working with Join when I got here, including Todd Gitlin, Nancy Hollander, Richie Rothstein, who did a great book on the color of the law and housing, and was an education writer for the New York Times, a number of other people. And we ended up, we had weekly meetings. We'd sing a lot of kind of country tunes and labor songs together, and we do little skits and plays. My sister Melody came to work with us and started the theater. We tried to get the Hank Williams playground over where the college is now. We tried to stop the junior college from being built and being carried down, which was really a heavy concentration of poor Southern whites in that area. The women's had a women's group starting to address women's issues. There was one of the big forces was the welfare women and some men. And we would go to the office, the welfare office with them, and make sure that they were being treated correctly and their rights were being observed. It was a interracial group of some Latino women, some Southern white women, and the two most formidable people were Dovey Coleman and Dovey Thurman, who were related to each other in some way. And one of them, Dovey Thurman, there's an award given out by
the North Side Action for Justice.
They give the Dovey Thurman Award every year. So she continued organizing after Join was over.
That's her, right?
Yeah, she's the one on the left right there.
Second from the left?
Yeah, and there she is with my sister.
On the right?
On the right is Dovey, yeah. And that's my sister Melody, who is still doing theater. We didn't do a lot of stuff around the war, but we did start to talk about the war in Vietnam and the draft. And I remember being on the wrong side of the issue because Slim Coleman, who later worked here after Join was over with Keep Strong and the Intercommunal Survival Committee, and when Helen Schiller becomes the alderwoman for a number of years, Slim had a piece about a draft organizing project, and I had a piece in the Movement newspaper really trying to hold back on bringing up the war. We didn't think these young Southern guys could handle it. We were really wrong. I was really wrong on that. People were really ready and pissed off about the war. But the young guys and the women were the two main forces. And the young guys were hanging around with us, and then Ronnie Williams got killed. There's a picture of Kenny Williams with his arms up. His brother got killed, and we ended up having a march on the police station. And there was some pretty notorious cops up here in those days. A guy named Sam Joseph, who I remember him I remember two things with him. I remember making out at the park down by the lake and him knocking on the window of the door and giving me some shit about how we had a march on the police station. And another time he got Lawson and I in a doorway with this kind of thing.
Is this the march, the photo?
Yeah, that is, that could be from the march. It could be from a demonstration on housing. But the Goodfellows came out of that. The Goodfellows decided they wanted their own place, and on the corner of Kenmore and Wilson, this building is still there, they had a hall, the Goodfellows Hall, that we got for them. And they really, a guy named Bob Lawson, who lives in the pink building nearby here, what's it called, Al? You know that big, Edgewater, yeah, Lawson lives there now. But he was the real organizer of that march. We also did a lot of housing work. We had rent strikes. I remember going into basements and turning people's gas and electricity back on. We had these ongoing battles. We had a march over on Kenmore at the Sampson building. We had another one down on Broadway that was one of the Marymount buildings, which was a foundation doing good things around housing, supposedly. We had a rent strike there. Back to welfare, I think the earliest rainbow coalition in this neck of the woods was when JOIN and the Latin American Defense Organization and the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization got together and did stuff around welfare. JOIN people also joined up with Dr. King and the marches into Marquette Park, which were pretty rough-edged. King called it, way worse than what he had experienced in the South. That same year, or in '68, I ended up giving an anti-war speech at the Coliseum with Dr. King and Dr. Spock, who was a famous pediatrician at the time, and also Emil Mazie from the United Auto Workers.
And that's the speech.
That's my speech. Yeah, there's not much of it left there, but I've got the original somewhere. Okay, so moving right along, in 1968, after the Democratic Convention, before the Democratic Convention, during the SDS had during the Democratic Convention, there was a meeting out in Indiana of a lot of SDS people, and the Peace and Freedom Party in California was trying to get Carl Oglesby, who was the president of the Students for Democratic Society, to run for vice president with Eldridge Cleaver. SDS didn't want to be involved in electoral politics. So I said, well, we wouldn't mind. Or somehow it came to me. I think it was Bob Avakian from this Revolutionary Union now. He was the one who had sought out Peggy as being the vice presidential candidate. But I became her campaign manager, and we toured the country talking about issues and trying to use it as a way to meet people in different neighborhoods or communities or cities and get them involved. One thing that I remember real distinctly is we were having a little rally in Louisville, Kentucky, and there were about 40 or 50 people there, and Peggy and I'm playing the guitar and we're singing "We Shall Overcome," and the next thing I know, the people are throwing rocks at us. Turns out it was the Klan, and the cops who were there had disappeared, and we ended up getting out of there and going to the Braden's house. That was Carl and Ann Braden, who were longtime anti-racist organizers in the South. So that's a lot of joint stuff. After the Democratic Convention, the election of that year was over, a group of us, many of us still living in Uptown, were meeting in Fairborn, Ohio, and we were trying to figure out how do we take what we were doing in JOIN and spread it to other neighborhoods and to other cities. And we went to see a movie called Wild in the Streets. And there's a song in that movie, "There's a new sun rising up angry in the sky." So I went back and said, let's start this newspaper called Rising Up Angry as a vehicle to spread the word and to recruit people. So the first issues of Rising Up Angry had hot rod cars and motorcycles, and we had a section called the Stone Grease Grapevine, which was oriented toward young guys, kind of greasers they were called, black leather jackets, A1 stay pressed pants, little pointy-toed shoes, slick back hair if you still had hair, and so that's what happened. I'm still living in Uptown during some of the Rising Up Angry stuff. I go on after Rising Up Angry in '75 to start the Heartland Cafe. Now I'm back in Uptown with Jefferson. Life is strange, but it's good. I could tell more stuff, and I think maybe show some slides, and I'll tell you a little bit.
Tell me about this guy. I love this, how you describe this.
All right, this is a photo from Nancy Hollander took, and these are two key people to that march on the police station. On the left, lighting a cigarette, is Jack Junebug Boykin. I remember his dad being drunk, sitting on the stoop, on the curb, down near Wilson and Broadway. But Junebug was a young guy who taught me how to dress. So I had Van Line shirts or Italian knits, pointy toe shoes, A1 stay pressed pants, and a Cabretta leather jacket. And I still dress that way sometimes. The other guy is the longtime bouncer at Carol's Pub up on Leland. That's Jimmy Curry. And Jimmy was the toughest guy in the neighborhood, or one of them. And he was crucial. I was just reading the book called Uptown, about Join, by Todd and Gitlin and Nancy Hollander. And it has a different name for him, but he's real racist. And then what happened in that march was not only the hillbilly kids, but there was a small black community over by Leland. There used to be just a couple of blocks, and he got together with another guy, and so there were black kids on this march too. It was really, we were anti-capitalist, then early on, and we were certainly anti-racist. So Jimmy was a good guy, and I saw him over the years once in a while when I go in there. Junebug is still kicking, hasn't been involved since the early days. If you follow the Rainbow Coalition that came a little bit later from Fred Hampton and the Panthers, it was the Young Patriots, which came out of the Goodfellows and Join, and was very short-lived, the Young Lords organization and the Black Panther Party. In that film, American Revolution 2, Junebug's in there a lot, and he's really, boom. I wish he had stuck with it. He's still pretty critical of Trump, etc., but he's not an active organizer type.
I'll just say I loved when you first described this photo to me, the details. Like when you were like, oh, this is one of the toughest guys in Uptown, I'm like, well, I'm taking notes. Like I'm trying to, and I'm like, who's the second toughest guy?
I think it was Kenny. What did I say, me? No, I wouldn't have said that, because I don't think I'm that tough. But it was Kenny Williams was a pretty tough guy. His brother Ronnie had been killed, and Kenny is, as I say, is a picture over there. And I did let him drive my motorcycle one time, and he crashed it into a bench down by Montrose.
Is that still
That's
there?
it. There's Carol's Pub. What's that next picture?
And this is also how you take
that's
photos.
Recently.
So this is, and I didn't drive with you, but when we drive around, and I know it's also like a mobility issue of just like walking all these neighborhoods, but you take a lot of photos like out of car windows, or I have a photo of you where you're shooting like just kind of from here. And this also like played into my mind as a photographer of like, oh, you're shooting these almost like from the hip. And it's not, like as a trained photographer, you'd be like, oh, I gotta hold it steady and all this. You just want to capture it.
Well, I started out doing pictures. I mean, I've been taking pictures since the middle 50s. And I started taking pictures mainly of hot rod cars. And then I went to Mexico on my motorcycle in '62 when I was 20. And I miraculously shot 4 or 5 rolls of film that are really just beautiful shots. That's a book to come. And I do have a number of books, and one coming out next week. I don't want to get into the weeds here. But I used to say I'm just documenting what I did so that I can kind of remember it. And I gotta confess, I have a lot of blurry pictures. Sometimes the blur is great in a picture, but not always. And So I'm not very good technically with the camera, but people have told me I have a good eye, and that's what I do now. It's like I write to photographs a lot, you know, whether it's up on Instagram when my son Hal puts up a picture every day and makes me write a little caption for it. You know, I get ordered around. I need these by Sunday night. But it's a regular thing. That picture there is a woman named Fran Ainsley, who was from Georgia. I think her dad was a big shot at RC Cola. She worked at the University of Kentucky and just passed away. But there's a number of pictures that are hers that are probably in this cycle. These are pictures of, on the left is the Goodfellows, and then in the middle is Fran and another guy named Tom Livingston, and then over on the right is Fran and Todd Gitlin and a guy named Steve Goldsmith. All were joint organizers, and Steve is doing a lot of work still in LA, and he's married to a woman from India, and they're, you know, raving leftists.
And this is political theater, right?
Political theater, yeah. I mean, we do these little skits every week, and people love them. I mean, you know, slapstick comedy with some political overtones.
And then I really like this photo too.
That's got me there, the tallest guy on the left in the back, and that is over on Clifton. And that was when we were trying to start the Hank Williams Memorial Playground. Hank Williams is a pretty famous country singer who was pretty good on race, I think, but his kid was terrible. Remember, he used to be the opener to the NFL games? Whew. Anyhow, we never got the playground, and Truman College is there now, which is a good thing that the college is there, but they ravaged a whole lot of stuff. Now these, I don't know who took the picture on the left, but that's the joint office before I got here. And the picture on the right is the same building, a photograph I took 2 weeks ago.
So this is probably the most direct connection physically. This doorway in this street is just down the block, and we'll walk over there in a little bit. But this office predates the one that you showed in the other photo, right? So that's basically like right before you got here.
Yeah.
And now, I forget what's in this space, but we'll see when we go down there. But what's interesting is if you look at the Zalapsky Drugs sign, so there actually was another sign put over that, that the guys in HAIBAYO, they saw they were tearing it down and they actually grabbed it. So it's just sitting in the back alley right now. But it was only when they took that sign down that they saw the Zalapsky Drugs sign. And they're like, wow, there are multiple iterations of this, just kind of peeling back the onion of this history. And I actually saw, if you look behind Hal there are some photos of old Argyle and Uptown. I'm pretty sure one of them has a Zalapsky Drugs shot too. Yeah, so it's just like coming up in all different ways.
73 from the L at Wilson Avenue.
And then today.
That's a few weeks ago, Wilson Avenue. This is, I think, another shot from that playground rally, and that's me on the left with a guitar. That's Doug Youngblood, who was Peggy Terry's son, and then Rennie Davis, who was one of the Chicago 7 on the banjo. He just passed away a couple of years ago. That's Peggy and I at a joint meeting. That is a picture I think I took a couple of weeks ago at the march downtown. And there is another march on May 1st. Everybody over at Union Park, and then we're going to march. I think it's really good we keep the pressure on. We have to. We don't have a choice.
Yeah, and I really like that you captured that sign, "No one can sit this one out." I didn't see it when I was down there, but...
Well, I got to say, there's a plethora of signs these days. Everyone, I know, there's a group in Rogers Park called Red Rogers Park or something that's new, and they are having a thing today or soon anyhow to paint signs for the next march. People are into it, and I know up in Rogers Park, I know of two groups of people on two different corners. Every Friday they're out there from 7:30 to 9 as people are passing Sheridan Road with anti-Trump signs, that kind of thing. This picture was while I was waiting for Jefferson from the coffee house right down across the street on Broadway.
Yeah, Fat Milk, which We have coffee from.
And that was, I watched this kid riding around his bike with his parents and his dad kicking the ball, and I think I got the ball on his foot there.
Yeah, it's a great shot. And I think this also just reflects what you take photos of. So I was talking earlier about a lot of the captures, they're cropped or framed pretty tight. Like you don't see a lot of the place behind the people, the focus being on the people. It almost takes you out of place. So that's one of the things that I was thinking about when doing this history talk is it isn't about the place. How do we talk about the people in the photos and bring those connections
I don't
together?
know who the young woman is, but the guy is a guy named Jay Ice, and I don't know what happened to him, but that picture was probably 1966.
And
The other picture was when Jefferson and I went to a place called Chapala on Clark in Rogers Park for tacos and things like that. And when we came out, these people were out front and I just started taking their picture. You're always a little amazed when I just start shooting at people without, like my wife Paige in the back, she'll tell me, "Did you get permission?" Like, I don't need permission to do this, but you're always like you light up, always taking more pictures.
And I think I love that because the photos also show that people do respond to you, right? Like they're willing to at least open. Like we met them literally when we stopped by.
10 seconds.
Yeah, and then you're like, "Let me take your photo."
Yeah, I just did kind of, they go,
Now you did say it in Spanish, which
it's okay.
it sounded like your Spanish was okay. So,
Está bien. That's good.
but I think that access is reflected in all the decades of your photography. The access that people were willing to provide you.
I have a lot of photographs of people looking right at me, like in Mexico in '62 in markets and stuff. And it's not like hostile. It's like, "Well, who's that guy?" And I'm a pretty smiley guy, friendly guy, and I'm also been, I used to be 6'2", I'm shrinking, but I think that being a big guy also has allowed me to get away with a lot of stuff. That's the two of us. A picture I took of Jefferson, and a scowling picture Jefferson took of me at the Pancake House over there on Broadway. And that's it? That's all the pictures you got?
That's it for the slides. Do you want to talk about other types of things you're taking photos of these days, or your photography, the porch gallery?
I would, let me just do a little bit of self-promotion here. I miss having the Heartland Cafe. That was really a wonderful experience for 36 years. We had a lot of great events there, from Harold Washington, Obama, further to the left, all kind of things. We served a lot of great food. And so what I started doing when I sold the restaurant in 2012 was I started writing and scanning photographs. I did a number of things for the Rag blog out of Austin, Texas. And if you go to the Rag blog and you type in my name, there's like 40 different pieces written to photos. I also got a little scanner and started scanning all these, rolls of film that I had shot pictures of. And that's evolved into what I call the Front Porch Gallery at 1509 Lunt. It's like a block west of the L tracks on Lunt, and I have a nice big front porch, and my son Hal and my wife Paige, and they helped me set it up. And I've got, pictures in my books, those kind of things. In the back, I do have some small pictures. Some of them are from Uptown, some are from other pictures I've taken. Those are 5x7s, and I have some 8x10s. I also have two books. One is a book I did called Crossing Borders, and it's Mexico, Nicaragua, and Cuba. And then a new book called Rising Up Angry, which is not all of my photos. We don't know who took them all. Al Koss, who's here, took one of them, I know. It's in the book. But everything is $20 today, or 3 for $20 on the little ones. And I have the poster of the Rising Up Angry covers.
And you'll sign them, right?
They're all, yeah, I'm ready to sign. I've got my pens, I'm ready. I've been teaching at DePaul I've been teaching a class called Activists and Activism since 1960. I don't know if I'll do it again this year or not, but I've done it for 10 years. Books coming out of the University of Illinois Press of these interviews. And it's basically, we got these young kids coming in, they're 18 years old from all over the world. I don't know how long that'll last. But we talk about joint community union, we talk about rising up angry, we talk about the Black Panther Party, we talk about Fred Hampton being assassinated. So we bring in a lot of people connected to these events. We talk about the women's movement. I go swimming pretty regularly, lift some weights and stretch, but I am feeling it, and I'm in my 80s. And I really appreciate when a guy like Jefferson, a young guy full of energy, comes around and fires me up a little bit and says, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. And so I'm into, as long as I can do it with the help and support of friends, still being an activist, still trying to play a part, and kind of producing the stuff that I happen to have in my basement, in my computers, in files, all this stuff that a lot of my kids are telling me, Dad, you better start getting rid of all this shit. But we'll see what happens to it.
I'll just end on two thoughts. No one can sit this out in that protest photo. I think that's absolutely essential. So to see Michael out in these spaces, out in these events, is hugely inspiring. But then it's also, one of the interesting things you said to me was a lot of these things, the projects you did, the events you go to, like the flyer you picked up off the ground, they almost happen to you. And
I'm very grateful for shit just comes my way. It really has different opportunities, accidents.
I didn't end up in The Fugitive, something happened, anyway.
I can tell you how that happened. Okay, what happened was Andy Davis is a filmmaker, came out of Chicago, and he was making a movie called Stony Island, which was, his brother plays the lead, and it's not a union flick, but he came looking for me. He thought I was a left-wing hillbilly. And I said, well, my dad actually produced Broadway plays, but he said, oh, that doesn't matter. And so he used me in most every film he's done. And usually I'm a bad guy or a cop. With Steven Seagal, I'm a cop. I get killed in a movie. But I do get a pension from SAG now, and I'm really grateful.
Which I think is the point. Like, these things show up and you're receptive to them. I mean, yes, however coincidence or fortune happens, you actually are receptive and you see the opportunities there because there's stuff all around. Opportunities all around, history's all around, and you're willing to engage with it. And I think that's also something that's really needed in this moment.
I basically believe things will get, I've been a meliorist for a long time. I wrote a paper in college about Gandhi, and it kind of ended with, the truth and goodness will triumph. And the professor, a guy named Donald Smucker up at Lake Forest, he said, not always. And he pointed out some really negative things in history, and he used the term meliorist about, belief that things will improve. And that's kind of always my attitude. I don't hold grudges too much, although I can sneak shit in later on. But I am a positive guy, and I've had good experiences in my life, and the negative things that have happened to me. Like, I was pulled out of a burning car unconscious in California in my 1940 Ford Hot Rod. And okay, well, that happened. It's just another story.
That's not the car we saw.
No, that's a different car.
You didn't tell me that.
No, I didn't. I haven't told you everything. I can answer questions.
Yeah, exactly. If there are questions, then maybe I'll learn new things here. Anybody have any questions for Michael or me?
Not a one.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. So I'm looking at these two photos, and then I'm just like, oh yeah, whatever. And then I'm looking at the email addresses, and I see your AOL and your Gmail, and I'm like, whoa.
That generational difference.
Exactly, like that's.
I do have a Gmail too. Now. In the back. Can't hear.
So, I know that Uptown has a history of immigrants coming into the neighborhood, and I was wondering if you saw that in action, or if you knew how that happened to now today.
When I was here during the period up until 69, no, it wasn't until 69, yeah, 69, 68, 69, I was still living here. I lived here in the 70s too, but I don't remember anything but I remember there was a country music bar here, but I didn't see much Asian action here at the time. The groups that were here, there were a lot of, smaller single room occupancies, places, buildings that had been divided up. So there were a lot of older people, there were a lot of people on disability, mostly white. There was a real heavy concentration of poor and southern whites. There was a small African American community, a few Latinos.
Native American.
And there was the American Indian Center, and then they moved over on Wilson, and that's gone. And there's, I have plenty of stuff that happened with people I met through that, and later, Native Americans and the American Indian movement.
And would you say Uptown, like the housing, was the thing that drove people coming in?
There's obviously a lot of room here for people. Uptown is a pretty interesting place. It was kind of upscale back in the 40s, and then it started to. You saw after the Second World War, that's when you saw a lot of the southern migrants coming north, because there were jobs, there were factory jobs. One of the things we did back in those days is deal with the day labor hiring halls, where you'd go for work, okay, looking for work, okay, I'm going to send you out to this factory, and we send you out there, and we're going to take a cut. So it was pretty exploitative. And I'm sure they probably still have stuff like that, but I don't have the details. And I think that, Chicago is a pretty, people always badmouth Chicago, racist and all that, but we also have large concentrations of places where people cross over and mingle. Polish, African Americans, Puerto Rican Cubans, whatever. I always liked the mix. I used to say, I remember I wrote it in a paper in college that I had a picture of someone here eating Chinese food, wearing a yarmulke, in a kimono, with Dutch shoes, listening to John Lee Hooker play the blues. And I really liked what I grew up with. America's a melting pot, a place where everyone was welcome. The good things that we hear, that we learned about we hadn't learned about the American nightmare yet, which we have today. We, really, enhanced to the max. But I do think that what kept me going is just a belief that people are basically good, and that people can change and become better. And while I recognize and acknowledge that there's some real evil shit that goes on and some people harbor it, that's not going to get you anywhere. You might want to defend yourself against it, but the best way to do that is to build the good stuff. People cooperating, people taking initiative and responsibility in their communities. And I'm sure that most of you are here because you're about that. I think, right?
What do you mean by American nightmare?
I mean, like the evils of capitalism, basically. We have a lot of good things. It hit me as a longtime leftist. I was a national officer of STS. I started Rising Up Angry, et cetera, et cetera. Where am I going with that? I just, I was pretty much into being critical of my country. I would say I love the people of my country. I don't love the government. When I went to the Soviet Union with Athletes United for Peace in '89, it really hit me. You did not see anyone who was like handicapped or challenged. Where were they? Chained to a bed somewhere? Dead? I asked the guides. They didn't want to answer that. I saw one guy on crutches from the war in, what's the most recent war the Russians had? Afghanistan, thank you. Old guy. I saw one person on a little cart. Other than that, I didn't see anything that reminded me of things I would see at home. And one thing that stood out was we all of a sudden here had curb cuts slanted right down, you know. You didn't see any of that. And it was just, I went in a fancy hotel in Sochi. I went inside to use the bathroom and there's a hole in the floor. So I realized how advanced we were compared to a lot of other places. And I am very appreciative of this country in so many ways, but I also know that we aren't necessarily the good guys. And that's what I talk about in my book, Crossing Borders, is I go to Mexico City, Kennedy's coming. I'm all about Kennedy, and all of a sudden I see signs on the wall, Largate, get out. And I said, I thought we were the good guys. I'm 20 years old, and that was when it really opened up for me that we were not the good guys all the time, good guys or girls. You know, that we have a long way to go. And I think the challenge is really before us now. I mean, how do we deal with, you know, a lot of people didn't vote, so they helped to elect Trump by not voting, but there's a lot of people who, I'm not sure where they're at, and there's a lot of people who were misguided. But we have a serious situation where, if not now, when? You know, when are we going to be involved? When are we going to stand up? When are we going to go to demonstrations? When are we going to take on our relatives? Whatever it takes, little bit. And don't bend yourself out of shape too much. I mean, one of the things that I think is important is that you nurture yourself all along so that you are able to move forward and help out in whatever way, you know, whatever opportunity comes your way. So that may be going to the gym, that may be listening to music, that may be playing with your kids, but try to have a good time and be prepared for whatever you have to do.
That is something I really appreciate about this talk and activism, and how much you incorporate art and the music, the theater, the photography, how that really does bring people together. But my question is, after your time at Berkeley, when you were recommended to work with the poor whites in Uptown, what was the reason for that feedback, that push? Was it a strategy thing? Was it to do with who you are?
I think it was largely what was needed in the movement. That you had a real lot of the impetus for change was coming from the voter registration movement in the South and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And if you haven't really looked into SNCC, that's the group you want to look at. Bob Moses, Bob Paris, James Foreman, they were just some really important people. But I'm not sure where I'm going with that.
Well, you said the conversation you had with
Oh, so Stokely, he telling me to go work with white people, and that was clearly they saw it as a need, that they needed more support from white folks who were not racist, or were only a little racist and wanted not to be racist. You know what I mean?
Hi,
You call me.
my name is Nicole, and I work for Voices for Neighbors United, which is a IPO in the war to help build political people's power. And I also wanted to ask you, I really love, because I've seen American Revolution 2, and I'm a huge Junebug fan. I would just love a fun Junebug story.
Do you have a fun Junebug story? Because she saw American Revolution too.
Oh, you know about Junebug. I think what just comes to my mind, I'm not sure it's a good one, but Junebug was in my house. I grew up in Westport, Connecticut. And, you know, there were times my dad was out of work, but my dad also did produce plays on Broadway. So Westport is kind of a plush town, although there were still farms there when I was a kid. Junebug is there, and he says, my mother says to him, "Why does Mike talk like you?" Or like a hillbilly. And Junebug just went, "I don't know, but he does." And, you know, so there was a time, you know, that I would talk, you know, into my made-up dialect, my southern dialect.
Like you would deliberately do it? Like you had to?
I think it became incorporated. It's like when you come back from another country, maybe you have an accent, I've heard, or maybe, yeah, I just, you know, what the hell, man, what the shit.
Any other
I try to talk clearly now.
Oh, yeah.
I just would love to know about your perspective of where we are as a country today with the Trump administration. I don't know, just thinking about like the doom that we all feel compared to different
This is the most serious challenge I think that we've ever had. Because I do think America is a nation in decline. That doesn't mean that's bad. It means that we've been sitting on the top largely because of imperialism. Maybe innovation, maybe create all kind of reasons, but we also had big militaries and we have subverted governments everywhere. What I'd like to say is that I look forward to the day when the United States is viewed as a nation in the community of nations that works for the good of the whole. And that white people are a minority in the world that work in support of the whole, even though they're the minority. And I don't think it's a bad thing that when I say we're in decline. I mean, why should we be the ones to be on top of the world, so to speak? That does, so I mean, I basically would say I'm still some sort of socialist. I would like to see, you know, the money generated by all kind of ways go to the people in all kind of ways, and that would be true around the world, and that we see that if we don't help people somewhere else, it's going to come back on us. And I just think that we didn't imagine how much shit we were going to have to deal with when this guy got elected again. You know, it was. I argue with my kids sometimes. Some of them, they'll vote for the Democrats if it's a challenge here, but if it's not a problem, they're not. Why vote in Illinois for Harris when it doesn't matter? But I think we really have to kind of swallow it up a little bit and sometimes not go for the most radical thing or the most leftist thing. And I wasn't like that in '68. I mean, we didn't support Hubert Humphrey, and we got Nixon. And I was in the street, I got photographed trying to tip over a paddy wagon, which got me a lot of publicity every time there's a Democratic convention. The CBS News, you know, I mean, one time I had 30 different news agencies from around the world come and talk to me about, because I'm in this picture, rocking the band. We didn't ever get it over. But no way would I have voted for Hubert Humphrey then. But on the other hand, now I would tell people, yeah, vote for Harris or vote for the Democrat, because it cleans up the sea a little bit, or the water, so we can keep swimming while we're trying to get to the other shore. That kind of, I have to work on my metaphors, but.
I like that one. Water quality.
I like water.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, and take a look at the pictures, take a look at the books, do what you want, and I will be around. I'll keep answering questions. If you need me to inscribe a book to you, I'm up for that.
I promised to walk, so if anybody wants to just walk down Argyle a little bit with me and see how that's evolved and changed and what it looks like today, we can do that. It's sunny now, finally. There's more coffee and donuts, I think. Take some with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.